Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing fabulously well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for a story this evening, because boy have we got a lovely story for you tonight that you're just going to absolutely love. So before we get started, you go and get yourself something lovely to drink. And if it's something unusual, let me know about it, because I do love hearing from you. So let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Izzy cannot believe she's doing this, but sometimes a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. And even though it's illegal, Izzy cannot afford to make any mistakes, nor can she allow herself to get caught. She is certain her hunch is right, and she needs to know. Why did she have to see Adam Applegate at the convenience store the other day? If she hadn't encountered him, she wouldn't be doing this. But now she cannot stop herself. She has blown all caution to the wind, and washed away all her common sense, so the dregs of her rational thinking have gone down the drain with the dirty bathwater. Normal people do not behave like this, but Izzy is beyond caring about what is considered reasonable law-abiding behaviour. She has to know. Her heart is pounding violently in her chest, and she can feel that her fingers have become quite sweaty, even though it is a cool spring morning, with a pronounced nip in the air. The prepossessing, unassuming street is situated in a very quiet, green, leafy neighbourhood in the bluegrass state of Kentucky, and the saucer magnolias and dogwoods are ablaze with spectacular blossoms. Izzy would be appreciating the beauty of spring if her mind were not so dogmatically distracted by her intense focus on Adam Applegate's property. She patiently watches and waits. She observes the comings and goings in the street. It's a pretty, very benevolent neighbourhood, where the charming eclectic mixes of houses are clustered together rather closely, like old friends. Some are Victorians, intermingled with more modern homes. The subdued grass, once faded and washed out after a dauntingly cold, somewhat hostile winter, has efficiently regained its leafy green gloss as the fragrant promise of summer gainfully approaches. The sky is a blissful cup of blue this morning, without an ominous cloud in sight, as Izzy sits patiently in her red SUV, while prisms of soft sunshine gainfully trespass through her windscreen, nudging her shoulders, so she is basked in a pleasing warmth that normally she would thoroughly enjoy, but she notices it not. As much like a guard dog on duty, her attention is strategically focused on the blonde double-story bungalow on the opposite side of the street. She is watching and waiting with the extreme attention of a skilled professional sleuth. A young woman with brown hair swept back in a loose, rather messy ponytail, wearing black leggings, along with a sporty minty green sweater with matching sneakers, is walking briskly down the street, with her Shih Tzu. The dog's nose is pinned to the ground, smelling the grass, as if on a fabulous, exciting scent trail. For a moment it is so fixated on a spot on the grass, the woman actually tugs on the lead, very impatiently. But the dog stubbornly refuses to budge, its nose eager to explore the scent still further. The woman frowns in annoyance, with that "I haven't got all day to indulge your every whim" kind of look on her face. She tugs more urgently and impatiently on the lead, and the dog abandons its previous obsession, and with a buoyant wagging tail bounds ahead of his owner, finally losing interest in the scent that only moments before had beguiled his entire focus. The woman's eyes glance over at the red SUV, where Izzy is sitting on the front seat, and for a brief moment her eyes lock with Izzy's. But then, struck by a bashful self-consciousness, she hurriedly looks away, possibly embarrassed about staring so inquisitively. She drops her gaze, so her eyes are now focused on her mint-green sneakers and the grass beneath her. She continues ambling down the street, not looking over her shoulders. Izzy sighs. She hopes the woman wasn't paying too much attention to her, for she doesn't want to be witnessed by anyone on the street, if she can possibly help it. But on a prepossessing, tranquil street like this, as benign as it may first appear, there could be eyes absolutely everywhere. Moments later, a large white SUV suddenly turns down the road, driving up an adjacent driveway of a nearby property. Izzy lowers her head towards her steering wheel, to below the driver's side window, so she is not detected or seen by the driver. Then the moment she is waiting for serendipitously arrives, like a pleasing parcel in the post that you never anticipated receiving. Then she sees him, Adam Applegate himself, the young man that she had always had a huge secret crush over the course of her childhood, since her kindergarten days. But the young man had never reciprocated her interest in him, nor had he even given her a lingering glance, which back in the day had broken her young little heart. She noticed that he is still as handsome as ever. Some things never change, as dark ringlets of natural hair frolic naughtily around his head, that always gave him that slightly wild, untamed, rugged look that she found so irresistibly attractive. Izzy had always irrationally liked the men who had shown absolutely no interest in her. It had been the tragic story of her life. The man is in very good shape, long and lean, clearly as fit as he had been when he was younger. Adam ambles out of his house with his 2 devoted King Charles spaniels at his side. He's kissing a young woman who is standing next to him and climbing into a car, and she drives away. They look as if they're living together. They could even be married for all Izzy knows, but she's not sure that they actually are. Izzy had always known that Adam Applegate was commitment phobic, having come from a family where his mother had been through 3 divorces, and half the time Adam had ended up living with his grandmother. Adam is wearing jogging pants and a sweatshirt, and proceeds to run down the street with the 2 obedient, nimble spaniels at his side. This is the quintessential moment that she is now satisfied that both residents of the modest double-story bungalow have left the house. The coast is clear. She's reasonably certain no one else will be on the premises, so she pulls her hoodie discreetly over her head, opens her car door, scans the street up and down to the left and right, and seeing that there isn't a soul in sight, she closes her car door behind her very silently and runs over to the double-story bungalow on the opposite side of the street that had once belonged to Adam Applegate's grandmother. She had been to all Adam's little birthday parties when she was a little girl on the property. She remembered Adam's grandmother very well. The woman made the most lovely jellies and orange skins, and some of the best iced gingerbread men she'd ever tasted. Isn't it funny, she finds herself thinking, the things you remember. Izzy must get to the back of the property, to the backyard, before she's seen by anyone. Izzy thinks that Adam's grandmother must have died a long time ago. Either that, or she's a full-time resident in a nursing home somewhere. She's fully aware her movements are furtive, perhaps because she knows what she's doing is intrinsically wrong. But there isn't any other way to tackle this problem, apart from digging through the trash, which might draw unwanted attention to her from local residents. And even if she did, she wouldn't know exactly what to look for. She furtively glances up and down the street again. No one is around, so she stealthily slinks to the back of the house. There's got to be a window open somewhere. Bravo! She's in luck. She finds one window open near the kitchen area and hits pay dirt. I can climb through this easily enough, she thinks, and her lean body wiggles through the window without any problems at all. She finds herself standing on top of a washing machine in the laundry room of the house. The room smells pleasingly of lavender soap and washing detergent, and there's a pile of clean laundry spilled haphazardly in a plastic basket. She notices women's clean undergarments mixed with men's boxers and vests. So the nondescript woman she saw coming out of the house is clearly living with Adam Applegate, and she feels an incongruous stab of jealousy. She shouldn't feel like this. She's a happily married woman, for goodness sake. And Adam only ever showed interest in her once, When she was half cut, that was. Izzy had never really been his type. She lowers her feet on the ground, and then she's in the house. That was easy enough, she thinks. But being in a strange property at the best of times is not comfortable, and she knows she needs to act fast before Adam returns home from his run with his 2 spaniels. If he were to discover her in his house, she'd have some explaining to do. Izzy's breathing is fast and furious as she promptly leaves the utility room, finding herself in the long entrance hall, where shafts of morning light seem to whisper through the house and bounce across the wall in gossamer shadows. She ascends the creaking staircase very cautiously, aware that every step she makes is annoyingly noisy, even though she assumes no one is around. Soon she finds herself on the landing, where there is a labyrinth of rooms. She needs to find the master bedroom, and a hunch tells her it's the first door to the right, and sure enough she enters the main bedroom, which appears to have spectacular pretty views over the street. For a moment she stands at the window looking out across the street. She can see her prominent red SUV on the opposite side of the road, and sees the trees with their boughs swinging against the soft breeze. It looks so pretty, so mellow, so serene, as everywhere she looks yellow daffodils are poking their mischievous yellow heads through the ground in large clusters. I mustn't be distracted, she tells herself. She enters the ensuite bathroom, sighing with annoyance, as there are 2 his and her sinks and toothpaste and brushes in one container. Which one of these toothbrushes is Adam's, she wonders. There's a pink and a yellow toothbrush in the container. Men would never choose pink, she decides. Adam must be the yellow toothbrush. It's a gamble, but she takes it. She carefully slips the yellow toothbrush into a small plastic bag, rolling it up and putting it into the pocket of her sweater. She turns around in abject horror to see an old, shriveled-up, small, willowy woman standing in the doorway, looking at her with a gormless, vacant expression on her heavily wrinkled, crepey face, with skin almost as fragile as rice paper. Izzy almost jumps out of her skin with a start. This has got to be Adam's grandmother. The woman is not deceased, nor is she residing in a nursing home. Adam clearly works from home, watching over his grandmother. They'd always been remarkably close. Izzy recognises the pale blue piercing eyes and the wild untamed grey hair that looks like a dandelion that has turned to seed. She was so certain that there was no one in the house. Before Izzy can explain her unfathomable presence in the woman's home, the old woman speaks, putting Izzy out of her misery at once and providing immediate calm. "Hello, dear. I wondered where you'd got to. I'm getting terribly hungry. You forgot to make breakfast this morning." "You always forget to make me breakfast. Do you know, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but you are always forgetting to feed me. We pay you a lot of money. You're not taking your responsibilities seriously enough." The woman looks confused, and Izzy realises that she has some form of Alzheimer's, so she relaxes. She gives the woman a watery smile. "Don't you worry, I'll get you some breakfast in a tick." The old woman looks vacant again, as if she's become blank like a blackboard that has been wiped clean of the teacher's chalk. Her weathered face crinkles up into an enigmatic, befuddled look, and the woman's lips twist downwards into a scowl. "Why do you keep wanting to make me breakfast, dear?" says the old woman. The expression that she's giving Izzy now is one that suggests that she thinks Izzy is as mad as a March hare. "What on earth is the matter with you? Don't you remember you made me breakfast half an hour ago? Is there something wrong with your memory?" Izzy smiles. Oh, you're right. How could I be so stupid? I'm such a klutz, I really am. I did make you breakfast, didn't I? The woman shakes her head. I also don't like the way you make my porridge in the morning, dear. It's dreadfully lumpy. If Adam knew you were making my porridge like this, he wouldn't be happy at all. I'm so sorry, says Izzy. The woman shrugs her shoulders nonchalantly. You need to learn how to cook, dear. What the woman does next rarely surprises Izzy. She pulls out her dentures from her mouth, handing them over to Izzy, giving her a gummy grin. Izzy is holding the dentures in her hand. She feels the bile rising up in the back of her throat as she fingers these revolting dentures. It reminds her of why she had never become a nurse. Be a dear, will you? Put those in the dishwasher for me. They're dirty. A hot wash will do very nicely, says the old lady, tottering away, muttering under her breath about Izzy's obvious inability to make decent porridge. Izzy drops the dentures on Adam Applegate's pristine carpet instinctively, in abject disgust. There is nothing worse in this entire world than handling somebody's dirty teeth. She rushes to the bathroom sink to wash her hands. I need to get out of here now, she thinks. Adam could be back in any moment. When she finally wiggles through the window of the laundry room, she safely slides herself out onto a patch of grass outside the window in the backyard and frenziedly scrambles towards the front yard. In a trice she has an unfortunate run-in with an old man walking his Jack Russell Terrier. Hello, dear, says the old man. I'm George Creston Barker. It's good to meet you finally. You must be Adam's fiancée. Bernice it is, isn't it? I've been looking forward to meeting you, dear. I've heard all about you. So have I, said Izzy, lying. I've heard all about you, Mr. Barker. It's good to meet you, Mr. Creston Barker, she says crisply. Isn't it a fine day today? The sun is coming out, can you see? I'm so glad spring is on its way, says the old man. Winter was brutal this year. Taxing it was. My old bones don't take very well to the cold weather, so I'm heartily relieved that spring is here. Where is that fiancé of yours? He's a lucky man getting a girl like you, said Mr. Barker, his hazel eyes lighting up in the creases of his orbital sacs. Let me guess. He's taken those spaniels of his for a run, hasn't he? You've got me, Mr. Creston Barker. He has indeed. You must forgive me, said Izzy, but I've got an important errand to run that cannot wait. But it's good to meet you, Mr. Creston Barker. It really is. The man looks disappointed for their conversation to be cut off so abruptly, but he's kind and sympathetic to the fact that young people these days always seem to be in a tearing hurry. He's glad in his day people tended to take life in their stride and were more casual and carefree. He's seen the world change exponentially over the last 50 years, and he's glad that he wasn't born in this generation. He's not sure he likes the way things are going these days. Run along then, dear, he says. I don't want to keep you. The old man watches Izzy dash over to her red SUV, and when she climbs into her car, he raises his veiny hand, dappled by so many age spots, as many as a Dalmatian. He waves at her with a cheery glint in his eyes. She waves back at him and drives away speedily down the long ribbon of asphalt like a bullet. I'm so not cut out to be a sleuth, she thinks. That was so close, far too close for comfort. I nearly got caught. Izzy is pretty sure Adam's grandmother imposes no threat, as her memory is like a sieve. She has nothing to worry about there. And as for Mr. Creston Barker, well, he's an easy-going character who takes life in his stride. and is unlikely to notice that the next time he runs into Izzy, that she's grown a few inches and looks decidedly different, but he'd likely put that down to a change in fashion and woman's individualistic hairstyles. Adam will likely assume that his dithering, absent-minded grandmother took his toothbrush, especially when he discovers her dentures conspicuously lying on his carpet. He might believe she lost her toothbrush and dropped it down the back of the couch somewhere, so he'll never know that his house was broken into by a surreptitious cat burglar with a macabre fixation and fetish for yellow toothbrushes. Such a thought makes Izzy giggle, as she contentedly hums to herself, driving back to her home, so glad that the journey was fruitful. Izzy lives in a beautiful rural neighborhood in Kentucky, where the vast sprawling properties are set wide apart from each other, many boasting opulent stable blocks, grazing land, and large lofty trees fringing the boundaries of every property for the purposes of enjoying greater privacy. Fairview's house belonged to her husband's parents, who moved into Martha's Vineyard and gave the mansion to their son, and the house with its Georgian influences is spectacular, with its open-plan rooms, high ceilings, and grandiose arched entranceways. Izzy is incredibly lucky that her in-laws are very wealthy. She could never have envisaged living in a grandiose mansion such as this. Sometimes she has to pinch herself to remind herself that this extravagantly decadent home belongs to her. She comes from more modest working-class roots, where her parents were always in debt, struggling to pay the bills from one month to the next. She is learning to adapt to her more privileged lifestyle. Her large, ungainly red SUV turns up the long driveway. She can see her friend's rather battered old Mazda, with a large dent in its rear, is still parked in her carport that's framed by rambling vines of exquisite purple wisteria. She's come to rely on Lucy Paget a lot these days. Lucy has been looking after her 3-year-old daughter Clarice for her. Izzy's daughter is her pride and joy, and has an extraordinary vocabulary for one so incredibly young. At 3 years old she acts and behaves as if she's 7, and at 3 she's already able to read. The doctors describe her as having the genes of a genius, so there is no doubt her child is going to breeze through school and bypass several grades. She suddenly remembers the lie she told Lucy. She needed to pick up some groceries at the store, that's what she told her, and now she's returned home empty-handed. But it's too late. She's back now. She'll tell Lucy she's left her wallet at home, and so will order the groceries online. That will be a good excuse. When she enters the house, she sighs with relief. Lucy is nowhere to be seen. She's obviously taken 3-year-old Clarice on her stroller for a walk in the woodgrove. Once Izzy has entered her house, she hurriedly runs down the marbled foyer, up the grandiose wrought-iron staircase to her bedroom. She dashes into her walk-in closet, and in one of her Louis Vuitton bags she pulls out a manila envelope filled with a DNA testing kit. Before long she's put the DNA sample from Adam's yellow toothbrush onto a swab. She's done much the same for Clarice's swab. She'll be posting the package as soon as she can, and in a day or so she'll likely be getting a response in the post. She doesn't know what she will do if Clarice is Adam Applegate's child, like she suspects is the case. She knows that Clarice might be her husband's daughter, Adam Applegate's child, or Tyler Paget's kid. Izzy had never been the kind of woman to be disloyal in a relationship, but unfortunately at a hen party that Lucy Paget had hosted for her at an upmarket venue, or hotel, a couple of weeks before her wedding, she had ended up being intimate with 2 men in one night, and the memory of how it all transpired was ambiguously vague, and her recollection of the fortuitous events that unfolded are rather like looking through a hazy fog that involved a few rather unfortunate flashbacks which made her recoil in both shame and self-revulsion. On the night of her hen party she had behaved like a prize slut, or a caged female tiger who had escaped her confinement and was hell-bent on procreating with every available male tiger in the vicinity. How she had regretted being ploughed with so much alcohol by her well-meaning friends. She had thought she could handle alcohol better than most, but how wrong she was about that. She couldn't help herself harping miserably over all her regrets, rather like a dog returning to its vomit, over and over again. I mean, what was the point? It only made her feel worse about herself than she already did. The extravagantly over-the-top hen party her friends had hosted for her at the Grand Hotel, where no expense had been spared, had definitely been fun. But one by one, everyone had retired to their hotel rooms, realizing that they had drunk far too much. Izzy's best friend, Lucy, had hosted the hen party, and had told her in no uncertain terms that she was frolicking shamelessly with the men at the bar. "You're rather frisky tonight, Izzy," she had said. "You've had way too much to drink. You don't want to do something you will regret. I don't mean to be rude, but you're throwing yourself at everyone like a loose cannon, which is not like you at all. You can't handle your alcohol, girl. You've had far too much to drink. You need to go to bed to sleep it off." How Izzy wished she had listened to Lucy's sagacious advice. But when you're plastered and 2 sheets to the wind, advice tends to evaporate from your mind, like the steam from a kettle. How she wished someone had locked her up in her hotel room. Then the inauspicious events of the rest of the evening would not have come to pass. But there was no point in crying over spilt milk. She couldn't go back in time to delete the script. Izzy was so drunk she doesn't even remember how it happened, but she had returned to the bar to get herself some ice for her water, as there was no ice in her hotel room, and she'd suddenly felt alarmingly thirsty and in dire need of some ice-cold water. She hated warm water of any kind, so a trip to the bar seemed like her only option. It would seem both men that she happened to be intimate with that night had attended a business conference at the hotel where the hen party was being hosted. Izzy vaguely remembers finding herself getting all cosy with Tyler Paget at the bar, who just so happened to be Lucy's cousin. On seeing her at the bar, he'd given her a huge smile, insisting on buying her a nightcap before she returned to bed, which in her condition was the last thing she actually needed. But at the time, another drink had seemed like rather a good idea. She barely remembers waking up in Tyler's hotel suite in the middle of the night, tucked up next to the man, her clothes lying across the floor in a faint memory of messy puddles. She was horrified about what she had done. She had dressed awkwardly, putting on her dress inside out, and clandestinely slipped out of his hotel suite, and then had bumped into Adam Applegate, of all people, in the passageway. She'd been trying to find her way back to her own hotel suite, and had been rather confused and disorientated. Adam had kindly offered to help her find her way back to her room, because she was so incredibly drunk. But then she had thrown herself at Adam, and one thing had led to another, and she had found herself waking up in Adam Applegate's suite of all things. It had been so embarrassing, and the self-disgust she felt was palpable. But Adam had also felt extremely embarrassed about the whole thing, about their moment of impropriety. When they woke up in the same bed together, they had looked at each other rather bashfully, with a great deal of regret. "We were both drunk," he assured her. "It happened. Please don't feel bad about it. Your future husband need never know about this. Just put it behind you. I know I will." Adam had been so genuinely kind towards her. He was a nice, thoughtful guy, and had tried to soothe her angst, blaming himself for what had transpired between the silken sheets of his hotel bed, which was a chivalrous thing of him to do. But Izzy knew she was equally to blame for their fortuitous transgressions. "I was just as much to blame as you, Adam. I'm sorry for what happened. We were both drunk." "But I should have been more of a gentleman and taken you straight back to your suite." "But it wasn't your fault, Adam," Izzy insisted. "I threw myself at you. I always liked you since kindergarten. I couldn't help myself. But you're right. We do have to put this behind us. Forget it ever happened, because if my fiancé finds out what I've done, he'll call the wedding off." "Don't you worry," Adam assured her. "I won't breathe a word about this to anyone. It's our secret." The problem is that sometimes, even years later,
The secrets you bury away in your closet, among the other skeletons, can sometimes come out in the light of day, when you're trying your best to keep them all buried. Izzy had been revolted with herself. How could she have behaved like this, even though she'd fancied Adam Applegate all her life? This was no way to conduct herself. She was engaged to be married to her betrothed and was behaving like a craved fan, throwing her undies at a pop star. She suspected that if any of her girlfriends at the hen party had any knowledge of her nocturnal activities on the night of her hen party, they too would have been appalled. Izzy had been brought up to be a woman with self-respect and dignity, but a week before she was due to marry Chuck Easterman, she had blown all her inhibitions away in the wind and abandoned her self-respect. Her father had always warned her growing up, "Don't ever drink too much, my love. One day you might end up doing things you regret, that you can never, ever take back." Why had she not listened to her father, a wizened soul who knew what he was talking about? Her father's warning words made her wonder if he too had some secrets he had buried away like a squirrel with its acorns, due to the unfortunate effects of alcohol on the human body. If he did, she didn't want to know about them. It was tough enough wrestling with her own demons. Izzy was in no uncertain doubt that if Chuck knew what she'd done on her hen night, he'd likely never forgive her for her brazen infidelity, and she couldn't blame him for that. If the boot were indeed on the other foot, it would be unlikely she could forgive him for being led astray. It had all been such a dreadful mess, when her daughter had come along 9 months later as a fortuitous surprise that she never saw coming. Izzy had realized that Clarice had been conceived in the week of her indiscretions. She persuaded herself that, of course, Clarice was Chuck's daughter, because any possibility that she was not, she refused to entertain. But Chuck had blonde hair and blue eyes, and Clarice did not look remotely like him. Even his parents had said as much. "Clarice doesn't look like any of us," they had said. "Where did the dark hair and green eyes come from? It is rather enigmatic. Our family's been blonde for generations. It's our Scandinavian genes, you see." Izzy had assured them that in her family there were a lot of people who had dark hair and green eyes, but that was not true. But it would shut up all the unwanted questions, and it certainly did. It was at a chance, serendipitous encounter at the grocery store, if you can call it that, when Izzy had inadvertently stumbled into Adam Applegate of all people. Izzy felt as if her life had been flung off its skates. She had seen Adam there, standing at the coffee aisle, reading the different labels on the bottles of coffees. "Oh my God, it's Adam," she thought. She'd have recognized him anywhere, and of course it was him. She felt a nauseous lump develop in the back of her throat, because Adam Applegate was the splitting image of Clarice, and seeing him there in the flesh sent haunting prickles all over her skin. Clarice had his green eyes and his buoyant dark curls, and a similar aristocratic nose. There could be no doubt. She was his daughter. Adam had turned around to look at Izzy, and been surprised to see her standing there staring at him so gormlessly, with her mouth half open like a Venus flytrap. In her shock, she had carelessly dropped the milk carton in her hand. It had smashed all over the white-tiled floor, so puddles of milk had spilled down the aisle, like an anemic bloodbath. Izzy's cheeks had burned with embarrassment, as a few customers glanced at her briefly through their peripheral vision, obviously all appraising her silently as a big klutz, but the milk had slipped out of her hands like butter. Adam had bounded over to her side sympathetically. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Don't you worry about the mess. The store will clean it up. It's their job. Just be careful you don't slip. I'll go and get you another carton of milk." And with that he was gone like greased lightning, returning with another carton of milk in his hands. He had always been so kind, so considerate, such a charmer. "Here we are, a new replacement," he said, grinning, smiling at her bashfully. "No harm done. You probably made the floor here a whole lot cleaner," he teased. "Long time no see, Izzy. How are you doing?" Izzy had felt herself guiltily flushing, as a burning heat rose up her neck to her cheeks. She tried desperately to avoid Adam's quizzical gaze. He could not see the thoughts that were whirling around in her head, or hear the silent, ominous whispers that trespassed in her mind like unwanted, unwelcome guests. "Clarice is Adam's little girl," the voices kept tormenting her. "Deny it all you like, but Adam is Clarice's father." His green eyes looked from Izzy to the girl sitting in front of the trolley, with her pretty tumble of black curls and her cute cherub face that rather reminded you of a Michelangelo painting of little angels. Clarice was studying Adam through her curious green eyes, waving her cookie around indiscriminately, as if painting the air with invisible ink. She was chuckling with amusement, almost as if the spilled milk on the floor had all been part of a lovely, very entertaining game. "It's a white pond on the floor, but there are no tadpoles in the pond. I like tadpoles because they turn into froggies, and froggies can bounce very high as a bottle over there," she said, pointing jubilantly at the shelves, with a cheeky, irresistible grin on her face that made her look all the more adorable. Adam's face had paled immediately as he looked at Clarice, as if all the blood had been expunged from his body. So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.